I want to start off by saying thank you to everyone for attending what is now our third Women in MedTech event. It's been a blast to organize and run this series, and I'm having so much fun connecting with all of you, and hopefully you're getting a lot out of it. We've had 2 amazing sessions, and I have no doubt this and the next are going to be absolutely fantastic as well. So I would like to start off by telling you what an awesome program we're going to have today. We are honored to have Representative Joe Kennedy on the line here to chat with us for a few minutes, and then Holly Scott from Mullings Group is going to give a fantastic presentation all about making the most of this moment. I think we've discussed in the past, this is kind of a crazy scenario for a lot of people. This is not exactly where we all thought we would be right now. So I think it's really great to take a step and say, let's do something awesome and let's have something great come out of this. So I'd like to introduce Representative Joe Kennedy to chat with us. He is a great friend of our organization and an outstanding champion of New Hope. He's the reason that we got involved with New Hope and know about them. So we really appreciate your leadership, Representative, and I'd love to turn it over to you.
Hey, Rachel, thank you so very much. I am really grateful to be joining all of you. Congratulations on putting together yet another speaker series here, and a great forum to get people together. Really grateful to you and the organization, and of course, Brian Johnson, for your leadership here and your willingness to step up and support a fantastic organization that is in need of support, but also deserves an awful lot of support and New Hope. I've gotten to know them over the course of the past 8 years that I've served as a member of Congress from the 4th District. They serve not every community in my district, but an awful lot of them. And a lot of the communities, I think, around a lot of the region around where many of the companies call home across Massachusetts. And I think it probably goes without saying, but forgive me for reiterating it, as essential as the services that New Hope provides, as essential as they were before this crisis, they've gotten all the more so during it, and will after it. We have the issues that come with, that surround issues of domestic violence and sexual violence, sexual assault, and such, are about exacerbated by isolation, by anxiety. They are crimes often of power, and that imbalance that comes with it. And given the moment that we are in with the economic uncertainty, the challenges that so many families are feeling, that inability of people who might be victims from being able to go out and engage in the rest of society, all of that increases the risk and likelihood to those that were already vulnerable and already in need. And many of you have seen some of that reporting where incidents of child abuse have come down of late, and not necessarily for good reasons, just that the visits that would normally take place between a child and those mandatory reporters is not taking place. Well, comparison obviously can be made for violence with adults and domestic partner violence and domestic violence. And so the services that New Hope provides to our communities are going to be as important now as ever. Marcia is on, Szymanski, thank you for your incredible work and leadership, and always being there for folks in need. And again, that need has become even more great in these moments. And to those of you that have supported, incredibly gracious and grateful that you have. Your money's going to an incredibly deserving organization that provides critical services to those most in need. So thank you all for coming together tonight. I'm thrilled to be here and be a part of it. And Rachel, again, thank you so much.
Thanks, but before we let you go, how are you keeping busy during this craziness, right? So I'm sure you've had some downtime, right? No? Love to hear
hour 9 of Zooms. So, this was not planned, but how am I keeping busy? Sweet. You want to say hi? Yeah. Okay. Well, how am I keeping busy? There you go. Say hi.
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 it is this amazing thing that happens. No, you can't have that. And you can't have that either. It's an amazing thing that happens when they learn how to remove the child gate. So I have been sequestered up in the attic for about, she came up for 10 plus hours a day, basically zooming my way around the country and such. I'm in the middle of a Zoom fundraiser for a domestic violence organization. But everyone come say hi. Yeah. Why don't you go home, sweetie?
It's too cute.
I'll anyway, so how am I staying busy? Rachel, right there. There you go.
I think we got that. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna let you get out of your attic, but thank you so much. I think that was
all
just
the glamour that comes with being a member of Congress, folks. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Representative, for joining us. Okay. So I think, that was a really, I loved that personally. So I cannot thank the representative enough. That was a really great, hopefully, shout out to New Hope and help you understand how important the work is that they're doing right now and how every donation has helped and will continue to help. So thank you all so very much. But I did want to give a real quick shout out to our sponsors for the Women in MedTech session, the Mullings Group, Sunrise Labs, and Zymatica. But they have been such outstanding supporters of the Women in MedTech sessions, and we could not do this without the support of our sponsors. So I think this is really a great time to say, Holly, let's turn it over to you. I know you have a fantastic presentation lined up, and everyone, we want to make this as conversational as possible, but I am ready to turn it over to Holly.
Thanks, Rachel. I really appreciate it. And that little cutie's a hard act to follow, and I don't have a sidekick like that, so I'll try my best without it here. But listen, I'm thrilled to be asked to participate in this. I am a big proponent of giving as much information as possible to empower individuals as they drive their career over a lifetime. I've personally been in search for well over 20 years, and our firm, the Mullings Group, is specialized in life sciences and executive search within MedTech for 30. I have placed individuals at all aspects of their career, early in their career, late in their career, C-suite, board level, and there are some common denominators and some things that I'd like to share today, regardless of where you are, because we are in unprecedented times, as we all know. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so making the most of the moment, that is our topic today. So again, my goal is to hopefully give each of you, regardless of where you are in your career, a nugget or two to walk away with that will allow you some empowerment so that you can make some good career decisions and think through some options. I think it's really important to start with a very important realization that we are not in the same boat. You know, yes, this is a global pandemic, and this is affecting the world in a way that none of us have experienced before. But at the individual level, this is impacting each of us differently. There are people, and likely those, some of us on the call tonight, who have either been actively looking and are now even more defeated because of this situation. There could be people who have been furloughed recently, and there could be people with more time on their hands that are gainfully employed, but starting to think more about what tomorrow looks like. And with that said, it's critically important that we accept where we are and set realistic goals. This development, career development, is not a overnight fix. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So we want to make sure we set a strong foundation so that we can grow. So accepting where you're at, realizing that taking care of yourself is number one, and looking at each day and look for baby wins and things that you can achieve the next day to continue to move on the positive path. I use my Maslow's hierarchy. Those of you who remember basic psychology may look at this and come back to it. I'm a visual person. we can think about our career in this hierarchy as well. And if we are circling in on the basic needs and we're living paycheck to paycheck, it's very difficult to think through a strategy to move forward and get into a more fulfilling, more rewarding potential situation. That makes it extremely difficult. If our safety or our health is in question, which some of us right now are dealing with either sick family members or even illness ourselves, or fear regarding security of the workplace or of our employees, all of these things will impact our ability to make decisions. And it's important to be aware of this because it empowers you as you make further moves. Mindset. We are our #1 advocate. Now, this forum is specifically labeled Women in MedTech, but not only women are guilty of not being their own self-advocate. There are many people who just are generally not good at advocating for themselves. They're better at advocating for others. This is a piece that I hope you will take with you. We need to be our own self-advocates. And it's not just because we need to stand on a podium and talk about how great we are, how great of a job we've done. We need to be our own self-advocates because it does help the greater good, whether it's the greater good of the opportunity that you're interviewing on, or the greater good of the team you're participating on, or the greater good of the corporation that you're a part of. If you think about your advocacy as a powerful way to move the overarching goal forward in a data-driven way, taking that emotion out of it, we likely do a better job, and it creates a stronger platform for us to have better advocacy conversations. So I see this time and time again. If you're prepping for, the simplicity is a prep for an interview. If you're prepping for an interview and you think about the value you're bringing to the organization, it may feel uncomfortable to say, I was able to achieve X, Y, and Z, or my team and I were able to achieve X, Y, and Z. However, if you can frame it in a way where you put it in the benefit of the organization, you tend to do a better job. I was able to achieve X, Y, and Z, and I see that aligning with your goal of trying to move this forward, and this is how it could benefit you. So it's a more data-driven argument, and I find people who are not good self-advocates tend to do better with this camp. Okay, another thing I subscribe to, and please, I apologize for the redundancy if you follow me, because this is something I've written articles about and speak to often. The most important meeting on your calendar should be one that you hold with yourself. On an annual basis, you should have a quarterly meeting on your calendar that is non-negotiable, that doesn't move around for soccer games or birthday parties or anything. This is something that sticks and is critical, because remember, you're #1. If we can't create the value here coming from you, then there's no sense in this. You're not going to have a bigger impact. So save yourself that time. I personally have this meeting with myself, this reflection period, on a weekend in the morning, because I'm a morning person when I know I have the strongest sense and ability to reflect. And I will think through, using my career diary, and I'll get to that in a second, I will think through areas that I have achieved over the last 3 months, areas that have been challenges for me, things that I have admired about others, areas that I'd like to explore and perhaps get more educated in, things I'd like to learn, lessons, people I'd like to approach as potential mentors. Anything that makes sense on a daily basis, I'll jot down in my career diary, and my career diary could be a pad of paper I carry in my purse. It could be my phone. It could be my laptop. It doesn't matter your mode of writing this down, but keeping notes along the way, because when you go to this meeting and you spend this time reflecting, you want to make sure that you have all this data to review. That is where things start to happen. Things start to crystallize. You start seeing patterns. You start seeing things that you have been consistently recognized for doing well. You start seeing things that consistently you don't either enjoy or haven't done a great job at, or areas that you could explore. Even people that you aspire to be more like, there may be patterns in the types of leadership styles that you fold under. And all of these observations are empowering for you to crystallize who you are and where you want to go. And it helps you drive who you want to become.
Holly, I have a question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, something that occurs to me during that is that we can often be hypercritical, and it's hard to be objective for ourselves. Sometimes I think writing down the positives and negatives about the things that you do every week is kind of like a Yelp review process. You want to throw out the high and the low ones and kind of shoot for those middle ones. So are there any thoughts you have on how to be objective?
You can ask around you too. Along the way, I tend to ask 3 or 4 people that work closely with me for some candid observations that they've had about things that you've done. And it may be in the form of, hey, you did a great job on that. And you may pull them aside later on and say, hey, thanks for that. But can you tell me why you think that what was it about my handle? And I'm asking this because, so it doesn't come off funny, I'm asking this because I spend time reflecting on what I've done on a regular basis and where I've been, so that I can work on areas to improve. So I love your candid feedback. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone. In fact, it's really preferred in this case for it not to be a direct manager, but others that you trust that can give you really some information around the circle of which and the sphere of influence that you hold. And that can be professionally, personally, any of these areas that you have observed.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, so your mindset, as we think through this, we are the marketable product and service, okay? Again, wherever you are in job search, whether you're actively looking or passively exploring, you are the marketable product or service, and we need to define a go-to-market strategy. What does that look like? Who's our target audience? Who's going to benefit from the value we bring? And who's really going to see this? So what are we looking to accomplish? And what value do we bring? And the technology is a huge asset these days, right? Technology and tools are better than ever. And I'll be the first to say, and Rachel and I were joking about it a little bit, that technology is not typically my friend. It takes me a lot longer to catch on to things than others. And I tend to be an old pen and paper girl. But in terms of career development and networking and creating a platform of branding yourself, there's never been a better time, and there's never been a better opportunity. So right now in this moment, jump on it. There are so many tools, and forget the term social media. It's all media. There's no differentiator anymore. Everything media related ties into you professionally. If you're not on media, you are now suspect. Okay, so those who have shirked being on media and want to stay away from it, understand at this point it's a bit of a ding. It's not everything, but it is a bit of a question regarding candidacy. It's the reality of the world we live in. It allows you, if you can embrace it and keep it simple, it allows you to network at scale. We are able to connect with and interact with people in our industry on a global basis, on a daily basis if we want to. The old handing out business cards at conventions can now be done at great scale. So there's significant advantages here if you can get yourself comfortable with it and build a brand. You have the opportunity to establish yourself as a subject matter expert, and that can be done at scale. It is amplified through media. I'll start with the LinkedIn profile. Whether we like it or not, LinkedIn is where the professional party is, and I don't see it leaving anytime soon. It is where things are happening. For the first time in history, we are all allowed to passively or actively look while not ticking off our managers, because we can have our information in the public domain. It's not only, it's expected at this point. So your LinkedIn profile should be robust. You need a professional picture, certainly. Doesn't have to be too professional. Anything you'd wear to a business meeting is fine. It should reflect your resume. Everything in your LinkedIn profile should be exactly what you'd have in your resume. In fact, I should be able to hire you without seeing a resume, because that's how thick we want this profile and how information rich. There's a section at the bottom of your profile that talks about other interests, and there's a section called groups. I'd encourage you to join as many groups as you align with, things that you think resonate with you. If you're in cardiology, there's tons of cardiology specific groups. There's surgical robotics groups, there's imaging, there's all kinds of unique groups that allow you to then be a second degree connection from anyone in those groups. So that's a really important piece, because there's no sense in having a LinkedIn profile out there if no one can find you. So we want to put the profile out, and then we have to connect and make sure that those connections are robust and thick. Connections, who you know and who you want to know. Don't limit your connections exclusively to people you've worked with. Those are great and a wonderful place to start. Increase your connections with a valuable message. Send a note to the person you're interested in connecting with, saying, look, I see we share the same interests. We're both in marketing and cardiology specifically, and major players in the Boston area. I'd love to make your connection. Perhaps we'll have a conversation either today or in the future. Something very generic showing that, look, I like this space, you like this space, let's connect. You're software engineering and in the robotic space, so am I. I'd love to network with you and stay in touch. Because what that allows you to do, even if you've never had a conversation with them, now you see what content they put out through your feed. So if you connected with Sally, the head of marketing at Boston Scientific, now Sally's content goes out on your feed, and she will share press releases, she'll share points of interest, she'll share anything along the lines of that resonates with her, and you have the opportunity to engage with it. You can literally have a information technology conversation with that person. If they put out content, you have the opportunity to say, hey, that's a great success for Boston Sci. I saw a similar challenge and was able to have a success with a similar technology. You can send a note, you can you can share it. When you engage with content with authenticity, you want to be yourself and be real, but if you engage with content and show them that you are interested and share the passion for the industry, you get their attention. And if you do that enough, you get on the radar of that smaller population of individuals who are really tight in that space. So consistency is key. We want to ensure that your message is out there in various forms, but also that you're active on a regular basis. It doesn't help to go on LinkedIn once a month, okay? You really need to be on it a few times to daily, 4 to 7 times a week, realistically, engaging to really get some action. And then you're in a warmer population of people who are getting attention in that particular domain.
So do you have any tools you'd suggest for organizing and tracking your networking activities?
So that's a personal preference. There's nothing sophisticated about what I hear people use. Google Sheets, Excel, date books, anything that you would normally look to typical follow-up. Excel is probably the one I see the most, just because it's simple and easy to use. And I'll get into that a little bit too, but the tracking of who you reach out to is a very, very important piece. Let me jump to that slide and let's see if we go into it, and we'll come back to how we track it, because that is important. Your job search is strategic and tactical, and all of that brand building ties into where you want to end up. That's our goal, right? Where do we want to end up? If you have certain companies that you're following that you're extremely interested in, it could be the company, it could be the geography, it could be the type of opportunity. Whatever your target company list is, you're going to peel out the individuals who are closest to you, who can acknowledge the value that you would bring to the organization. So the person that would feel the pain the most without the value you bring are the ones you're going to start with. So getting back to the question on how to track, if you're thinking about who you connect with and the minutia there, think more broadly. So start with your companies and start with the target organizations that you're following and date when you start following them. And then the individuals, as you connect with the individuals within the organization, you're going to start with the person closest, send them a well thought out connection request. You should, chances are pretty high, being an industry professional to industry professional, that they will accept your request. If they don't, they don't. But if they do, you then have more detailed contact information. You have direct emails, you even have phone numbers. So often, sometimes. So the email is the next step I'd make after a couple days. I would send a well-crafted email with a subject line of thanks for connecting on LinkedIn, cardiology marketing, something that's going to get their attention, that they're going to realize that there's some kind of connection, and they may not remember your name, and include why you're reaching out, why you think you'd be valuable to the organization. And at that time, if you would like to send your resume, fine. They will also have access to your LinkedIn profile and offer the opportunity to have an exploratory conversation.
Okay, awesome. So, when we're talking about LinkedIn, another question that came in, and I have a very good, this is also a good question. I don't know the answer. Is there really a difference between being a premium LinkedIn account and just a standard free membership? In your opinion?
Well, I know that there are differences. From a candidate perspective, to be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know what those differences are. I know that there are differences. In terms of searchability and being found, I do not believe that there are. So you have access as a premium member to benefits of your outreach versus the ability to be found. The things I'm giving you are free. These things should not cost you any more. They cost you time. They cost you time. You have to put work in. You have to put time in. Your profile and your ability to be found are what we're focusing on with the actual LinkedIn profile. The premium, from what I understand, is it gives you better access and more in-mails or ways to contact people. But if you're reaching out to them through a connection request, there's no limit there. You have to include though that note. You have to include a well thought out note. If you send blind connection requests, you will be limited.
So that actually leads really well into the next question on replying to connection invitations with no message. So I think there's different varying perspectives on LinkedIn. Is it better to have the biggest network possible and accept everyone who connects, even if there's no real connection there? Or should you be a little bit pickier about who you connect with if they don't send a message?
I think be somewhat careful, but don't be too careful. And here's why. Sometimes there's a lot of, especially now, I'm getting them on a daily basis. There's a lot of solicitors and things that are coming at you from an angle that you really have no interest in. So if you see that, of course, you don't necessarily want to connect with that. But if I'm in job search mode and I'm getting blind connection requests and I look at the person's profile and I don't know them, but they have a significant following and they do appear to be in my industry, I would connect with them. And why? Because they will now be a broker of me to other connections if another connection is trying to find me. So if Marie O'Malley is trying to find someone that is a connection to this particular person, she'll be able to scoop that person out. She'll find me easier if I'm connected to somebody who's got that kind of a wide net. So don't be too skeptical. Yes, we have to be careful. I don't connect with anyone that is blatantly spam or is outside of life sciences. There's really that I try to keep my connection base fairly clean in that way. But if you scrutinize too much, you'll find that there's a lot of diminishing returns, and there is something to be said for number of connections.
Thank you.
Yeah, and more than number of connections, consistency and action is really important. Someone with less connection, but they're out there taking action on LinkedIn and sharing information or liking information or engaging with content will be more often pulled to the top of the pile in a search than others who maybe have a bigger band number wise, but they don't necessarily take action on it. So beyond the traditional recruiters and job postings, these are things to start with. Recruiters, job postings, those are, it's not an or, it's an and thing. These are all part of your job search strategy, and they should be an area to spend time on. Recruiters, as you all are likely aware, we're typically at the whim of what our client hires us for. There are certain circumstances that we may have a unique candidate that we see might be extremely beneficial to a particular client. We might be able to go back to that client and see if they want to create an opportunity, but it's rare. So my suggestion on recruiters is stick with ones that you know through referrals and through network and through reputation, and limit it to, I don't know, 3 or 4 is a rough guess. I know that there's some that have been in the industry that we tend to refer to each other. So there's some very good ones out there. And postings, follow them, but don't let that be your only move, because that you have no power in a posting. You put it out there and then you're just sitting and waiting. So if you see a posting with an organization that you're interested in, don't stop there. You could go ahead and apply, but you also want to go to the individual that you suspect is leading that effort. There's nothing wrong with doing a dual approach. Virtual network meetings, as I commented on, those are also a great source. And not just attending them, but looking at who attended, who's going to attend, and networking before and after, sending a message before or after. And by the way, everyone on this call, if you're not connected with me already, send me a connection request. I'm happy to connect. That will allow you to be a connection to at least another 30,000+ individuals within the life sciences space just by being connected to me because of our connection. So it's a spider web, but it's one that will benefit you because your goal is to be on the radar of organizations that you may have interest in. So is this time opportunistic, or is it, are we full of fear? I would like to walk away from this with some sense of empowerment to each of you for where you are today. And if you are in a position where you are actively looking, know that the job search is yours to own, and self-assessment and growth is yours to own. And there's so many tools out there that are available to you. And hopefully you can just think about things a little bit differently. And those who are in a situation where you are gainfully employed and looking for that next challenge and thinking it through, we can wait and see what happens, and we can see if somebody knocks on our door, and that does happen. But sometimes you got to be ready for it. And by being ready for it, really give some time to reflect on what opportunity would pull you out of where you're at today, what would pique your interest, internally or externally, because it really will help you be better prepared to capitalize on that opportunity should it come up. So at this point, I'm open to any other questions.
I definitely have some around, especially this last slide. So I would imagine that a lot of people on the call we're all in the same position in at least one respect. We're being asked to do things that potentially are outside of our typical job description and are not things that we would have necessarily been doing before. Maybe we're having to manage people who we weren't before. Maybe we're having to motivate. Maybe we're taking on responsibilities. What's the best way to kind of assess what things we're taking on during this crisis, and how do we add them to our toolkit?
That's a really interesting question. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a person that I placed recently. She started at a new startup, and within 3 weeks, COVID happened, and she was frontline on their clinicals, and their clinicals were all put on hold. So she said, I don't even know what to do. They're paying me and I have no job, basically, and they're optimistic about getting back to clinicals. But at the end of the day, We're all doing things that are different. And we're all saying, this isn't what I signed up for, or this isn't what I expected. Come back to my point of, where can I be of value to the organization? What does the organization need right now that will help the organization move forward? No matter how big or how small, if you look at it in terms of how can I keep this boat moving in the right direction, and what can I specifically do to make that happen and push the entire organization forward, that will dovetail into a position of strength for you. Not immediately. It will rise up though. It will rise up. So where you're going to benefit from this, Rachel, is not today. The today is you're gainfully employed, and we're going to get through this. That's today, right? Today you're still employed, you're helping the company. In a year, in 2 years, whenever it might be, that will pay off in some way. It'll either be direct or indirect. Someone's going to notice, and I've heard this referenced quite a bit, of what you did in unforeseen circumstances and how you moved forward and how you weren't afraid to make calls, do things that you weren't doing. This clinical person was making calls to her clinicians just to keep them warm, and just saying, this is what she was doing. She was calling and saying, hey, I know we're going through this. How are you and your family? What are you? Anything to keep things moving in the right direction. And make note of it. At this moment, you're going to come back and you're going to jot it in your career diary. Here's what I did today. And at some point, when appropriate, you're going to pull that out of your toolbox, and somebody's going to be impressed that you were able to that you were able to do that at such a difficult time.
Okay, so let's talk about career risks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any risks people should be considering taking now? Follow-up question someone else had, and this dovetails really nicely into it, is making a career pivot during this time, right? Moving from one role in healthcare to another. How are employers going to be looking at this in the future?
Okay.
And what's the opportunity right now to kind of take a risk and maybe try something new?
Okay. So a couple layers to that. There's never been a better time to pivot. Never been a better time. This has happened in each recession and each economic issue we've had over the last 3 decades. When these times happen and we make moves, there's a level of forgiveness that is built in to these years that will be acknowledged, okay? And if you are in a position where you're looking at an organization and you're saying, I'm not sure, perhaps it's a lesser level role. Okay, let me use that as an example. I'll use a couple different examples because I have some real time. If I'm let's say I was a VP of marketing and I was furloughed and I've got an opportunity and it's a really interesting technology, but you know what, it's a director level and I'm just not sure how that's going to look, and what happens to me long term? Will this be perceived as a negative? The bottom line is, if you are continuing to grow in this period in some way, there is a built-in layer of understanding that's not going to be there in different times. It's not there in 2018. It's just not. It's a different level of acceptance. When we understand that the economy is what it is, there is an understanding that people are going to do what they need to do. And if they're able to continue to grow during this period, all the better. In terms of risk, if we think of risk in terms of like smaller companies and financing, an interesting thing happens in these periods. The companies that have funding and that are securely funded and have a strong business plan do better. They do better than they would have without the crisis, because there's been a lot of mud that falls to the wayside, and they're more of a clear front runner in a particular market. If it's an iffy company with an iffy technology and iffy financing, they don't do well. They wash out. There's no forgiveness there for these organizations, because the investors right now are being more selective. So if an organization is a startup and you're saying, gosh, is it time? Is it a good time to take a risk? If they have funding right now and they have a crystal clear message and good leadership and a great mission, they may be the best game in town. You may be in a less risky position there than you would be in a big organization where you have no idea what their next move is going to be in response to this. So that's one aspect of risk. If you've got a tight business plan and you've got a good market opportunity. In terms of pivoting is, and that's an incredibly loaded statement. So as long as what you do well and what you enjoy are at the core of it, you can pivot in various directions, and you should be willing and able to do that, because at this moment, as we look towards the future, the trends and the things that are going to be of interest and the areas of growth are different than they were 6 months ago now. We're already looking in the rearview mirror. There are already going to be advances that are completely different pre-COVID versus now and moving forward. So absolutely be open to pivoting. Absolutely assess where the market's going and what growth sectors you should align to. And try and stay as close to what you've done already, because if you make an incredible jump on technology, on foundation, everything else, then it takes you a lot longer to get going. And getting back to the period we're at, we don't have a lot of ramp up time to add value. There's not going to be the patience for that. So ensure that if you are pivoting, that you're staying within some of your core competencies to ensure you have that platform.
Okay, I definitely have a follow-up question there. Since you said that, if people are by choice or by necessity pivoting and taking on new roles that potentially have a lower salary, what are the options, when things do go back to the quote unquote normal or the new normal, and they are trying to negotiate out of that situation? What kind of tips would you have for that? Or are they going to be stuck, having to take this lower salary to take a job to get into an industry that perhaps is not what they were earning before? Is there going to be a way to jump? Any suggestions or tips on that?
Yeah, so first of all, we must acknowledge that this year, there's a general adjustment going on. In general, people will make less and work more. Okay, that's the nature of a crisis like this. People will make less and work more. So if you're going to a position where you're making less and you're still able to do what you need to do and you're still getting good experience, try not to focus on that too much. It's difficult to predict what that will mean a year out, 2 years out, because it really depends on how quickly our economy bounces back, because economy is going to drive demand and demand drives comp. So if the demand for your skill set dramatically increases, it's highly likely that we could get that V bounce back that everybody's hoping for, economically speaking, and the economy and demand drive compensation. So again, there's no way to negotiate for a future salary right now, not knowing what our future looks like. But if you're taking a pay cut right now, you're not only are you not alone, the majority of employed people are taking a pay cut, and those that are not are unemployed. So we are not in a situation right now where we're seeing, and I call it more of an adjustment, because the last several years there was a significant acceleration, and salaries were getting quite inflated. So it's a bit of a cleansing.
Any suggestions or tools on how to recognize your value and the strengths that you bring to an organization?
So once you know what they are, the key is to know what they are, and then look to reverse engineer in the audience that you're looking to engage with. So if you are a think of the best example here. Let's just use a R&D director or vice president. If you're a high level technical person and you have certain skills and assets that are around software platforms or artificial intelligence or algorithm development, the way to go about presentation is to look at the person you're looking to engage with, what they're looking to accomplish, and then front load that in conversation. So you're going to get their attention. So it's really, again, it's time. Everything I'm giving you is free, but this is not easy. This is a lot of homework. And if you're serious about engaging with a particular individual or company or team, that kind of work becomes important. It's a one-to-one thing. It's got to be custom. It's got to be specific to what you're going to bring to them. So it's pointed. It's, here's what I've done. Here's what I believe based on what you've shared, or based on what I've read that you're doing, that where you might see value. And here's what I believe we could do together.
Great. To what extent are you seeing the consultant contractor requests versus direct hire? Any thoughts on this route when exploring new ideas?
I think it's an excellent route. I think there's never been a better time. In fact, our team is such, we so believe that this is such a strong part, especially in the startup world, that we have created within the Mullings Group an interim business. And for the 2 decades prior, I was a little concerned about opening up an interim business within our practice because we concentrate on full-time search, and we didn't want to take away from that or change our business model. But what we found is, if we serve young companies and even larger organizations in MedTech, there's often a short-term need. It just simply doesn't make budgetary sense to have a full-time reimbursement person or a full-time regulatory consultant. So consultancy is it's a great skill to gain if you haven't done it before. And it is not, there was a period, and I think there are certain positions where they may be pigeonholed, but in the MedTech industry, consultancy is not a negative, and you can learn a lot. You can bring some really interesting experiences, diverse experiences to your next full-time employer. It doesn't have to mean it's permanent. You can consult right now, and perhaps next year look for something full-time. You can do both. You can consult while you look full-time. So yeah, it's never been a better time to look at consultancies.
There was an article that came out in the New York Times, I believe just a week ago, that was talking about the job loss recently, and they were calling it a she session, and just pointing out that, I mean, although it's not a startling statistic, 55% of the jobs lost during this time frame have been female jobs versus men. Any thoughts on that? Now, they did talk a lot about it being very industry specific, but I just thought I would see what you may think about that.
Yeah, no, I read that too, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that. And many of those impacted, unfortunately, were tied to hospitality. They're tied to service, which is generally a highly female population, in those areas. So we're not seeing a difference in MedTech. It's 50-50, I would say. But it's terrible. I wish I could give more context on it, but it's just, it looks like a factor of the industries that they've been in.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, I think some of the concerns that I've voiced with a few others is, I think women have made a lot of strides in various industries, and it's going to be really hard to try to maintain a handle on, and it's not just a women thing, it's a men thing as well. How do you manage up, and how do you, make sure that even when you're in your position, you are doing the right things and getting credit for the things that you're doing, and that you recognize your value. And I think a lot of the questions have come into that as well. Really, how do you understand the value that you bring? And I think it's just a big question for employees overall.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not going to happen in that first meeting, right, with yourself. It's not but that's where it starts. So as you're putting down, gosh, I don't know what the value is. I don't really know where to start here. If you start with your notes on what you think you do well, and if you really need footing, get those few trusted people around you at either mentors or peers or friends that are in business, especially those who you aspire to grow like. If there's individuals who you do look to and want a path of similar nature, ask them what they believe your true value is and what you can work towards and what you can focus on. They can kickstart that first meeting with yourself. They can help you. That data can help by identifying where you've been and where you want to go. And then the more often you do this, the better you get at it. It becomes a stronger platform. Then it becomes easier to speak to your value in interviews. It becomes easier to speak in your reviews and even in your team meetings. It's not about, oh, wow, look again, how great I am. This is about, look what we did together, guys. This is terrific. And here's what happened. And bringing the entire goal of the organization front and center. So if you keep the organizational goals front and center and make that the question you ask yourself every day, and with my clients, I'll ask myself, okay, what's the challenge we're looking to solve, and how can we get there? What needs to happen? And if you think about the challenge you're looking to solve being your career, what's your next step? How are we going to get there? What does that look like? And there may be still gray areas that you're not sure of, but I promise you that there will also be moments of clarity that you'll say, wow, you know what? I never thought of it that way. I'm going to put in action on these 2 items. And even if you target 5 companies as walking out, that's huge. That's 5 more than you had last week. So these things will happen over time, but it takes that time of self-reflection. If you get on the hamster wheel on Monday morning and you get off Friday night and you don't think about anything from a proactive perspective in your career, you will stay on there and someone else has the reins. Someone else is driving what should be your career. So take those reins and give yourself the time to reflect on it and make minor adjustments along the way.
Okay, quickly, one more question and then we'll wrap up. If you're trained as a physician, what skills are really valued in the MedTech industry? Someone maybe thinking who is trained as a physician or knows someone who has trained as a physician trying to get into a potentially MedTech role, potentially development, clinical, but they may not have the applicable experience. Are there maybe key skills that the MedTech industry values?
Typically, MDs or clinical professionals overall make that industry crossover closest to their disease specialty. So wherever their disease specialty may be, whether if it's respiratory therapy, they may be really interesting to a ventilator company. If they're in cardiology, there's stent companies, interventional companies. So they tend to stay close to it. The ones who may be most interested in taking somebody for a first play on the manufacturer side, you may want to approach initially as an advisor, see if you might be a clinical advisor. In other words, work for free until you have the position to add value, because unless you have clinical operational experience or have sat as a medical director, it can be tougher to get that experience without starting with domain expertise as an advisor, as a key opinion leader, and then making that transition in.
Holly, thank you so much for a really great presentation and for sharing your expertise with us. I know I found it incredibly helpful, and it's just one of those things where we have to constantly keep thinking of ways to recognize what we do as a team and really value what we bring to the table. So this was incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Well, I hope so, and I sincerely appreciate it. As long as you can walk away and say, okay, there's 1-2 little tidbits that might help along the way, then then hopefully that'll make an impact. So thank you all.
Fantastic.
For the opportunity.